Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apalachicola Chattahoochee Flint River Basin Drought and Water webinar for the month of May. My name is Rachel McGuire. I'm with the Auburn University Water Resources Center located in Auburn, Alabama. If you are new to this webinar, we'll have time at the end for comments, questions, and discussion. Feel free to use the question box throughout the webinar if you have any questions for our speakers, and we will address those after our last speaker has finished. Our speakers today are David Searden, the Florida State Climatologist at the Florida Climate Center of Florida State University. He'll be sharing our current drought status and seasonal forecasts and outlooks. I'll be covering for Tom Littlepage of the Alabama Office of Water Resources with the State of Alabama input. We have Paul Ancorn, a hydrologist with the USGS South Atlantic Water Science Center, who will share stream flow and groundwater conditions. We also have Samantha Lucas of the Apalachicola National Estuarine Research Reserve, who will update us on Apalachicola Bay salinity levels for the past month. And we have Todd Hamill of the National Weather Service Southeast River Forecast Center, who will finish up with Basin outlooks. And I neglected to say we have Cindy Donald of the Army Corps of Engineers Mobile District, who will also give us our reservoir conditions. With that, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, David Searden, when you are ready.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Rachel, and it's good to be here once again after taking a month off in April. Today, we're going to focus on the seasonal hurricane forecast and the tropical season as much or even more than drought. And it's very timely as NOAA released their seasonal hurricane forecast for the Atlantic Basin just this morning at 11 o'clock. And it's very timely because this is the first, looks like it's going to be the first time in the last 7 years that we have not had a named tropical system in the Atlantic Basin in May, prior to the official start of hurricane season on June 1st. We actually came close late Saturday night as what we call a mesoscale convective system in the Gulf of Mexico actually began to spin and actually spun up right before making landfall near Mobile or Pensacola, Florida. And these radar images actually show really organized banding and a center of circulation late Saturday night. A weather station in Pensacola Beach measured a sustained wind at 51 miles per hour. And we see that the radar velocity products actually kind of support that. And this circulation stayed together even into yesterday as it moved into central Alabama and central Georgia. So as the National Hurricane Center goes back and reviews the season, they might upgrade this to a tropical depression or a named system, but as of now, it was not. So we'll go to the next slide, and this is not unusual. A little background of mesoscale convective system is just an organized cluster of thunderstorms, very common over the interior US during the summer months and can occur out over the open Gulf or in open waters also. And these MCSs can actually develop their own vorticity or spin due to interaction with the environment around them. So we actually had another one this morning off the coast of Texas. Very little chance for it to develop into something tropical, but just in the last 30 minutes or so, as it's making landfall at the Texas-Louisiana border, it was starting to show some rotation and some banding features. So while it wasn't a tropical system, if it was out over the open water for a period of time longer than today, who knows, it might have developed. So it's these MCSs over the Gulf are always something that bear watching, even though most of them do not develop. So with that, we'll go ahead and shift gears and start talking about drought. And here I show that's mislabeled. It was 2 months ago in our last webinar as of mid-March. that showed the drought situation across the southeast over on the left, where we saw a pretty broad area of abnormally dry conditions across South Georgia, South Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, extending up into the coastal Carolinas, and also an area of moderate drought in the heart of that region. This has mostly been short-term or rapidly developing drought, mostly because it occurs at a critical time of year when evapotranspiration is ramping up, and a period of several days without rain or weeks without rain can really impact the planting season for row crops. And over on the right, we see the current drought monitor as of last week. We see that moderate drought still remains in place across South Georgia. Abnormally dry conditions are developing across North Georgia, North Alabama. Conditions have eased in the Florida Panhandle with recent rainfall, but moderate drought also continues to hang on in South Florida. We also see some areas of D2 or severe drought along the Georgia and South Carolina coast, and again in coastal North Carolina. So drought is worsening in some spots, easing up in others, kind of as we would expect in this spring dry season as we transition into the summer rainy season. On the next slide, we'll take a look at what I was talking about with short-term drought or rapidly developing drought. And the University of Alabama Huntsville's Lawn and Garden Moisture Index is always a really good tool for tracking this short-term drought. And there we see the really dry areas across North Georgia and inland South Carolina. We also see moisture areas across most of South Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, and Central Florida. So this is a really good indicator where drying conditions are rapidly intensifying. And we also see dry conditions hanging on in South Georgia, where they are struggling to have enough moisture, especially in rain-fed fields. So on the next slide, we'll take a look at recent rainfall. And the last 7 days have been pretty good for us. We see widespread amounts of 1 to 3 inches across the Florida Panhandle and South Alabama. Most of Central and North Georgia received between 1 and 2 inches of rainfall. We see the drier area in the Florida Big Bend extending up into South Georgia. And again, heavier rainfall across Central Florida, which helped ease drought conditions there. So kind of a mixed bag as we'd expect at this time of year, but all in all, a pretty good week of coverage and amounts of rainfall. On the next slide, we'll take a look a little further back at the last 30 days of rainfall totals. Again, this is radar derived. And we see very good coverage over the state of Alabama, amounts between 2 and 4 inches or 5 inches, which is close to climatology, but it's very good coverage for the state of Alabama over the last 30 days. Across Georgia, especially North Georgia, we see spottier coverage, and a lot of the green area, which is less than 2 inches of rainfall across North Georgia and the headwaters region, which is not keeping up with average rainfall for this time of year. And so we see the drying conditions there. On the next slide, this really illustrates how what we've been looking at these past couple months is short-term dryness. This is actually rainfall deficits or surpluses over the last 90 days. And looking at this map, no areas really stick out. We see a little bit of dryness across South Georgia, mostly moister than normal across the state of Alabama, and certainly across central and north central Florida. So while 90-day totals don't show much of a dryness or impacts of drought, it's this coming and going of short-term dryness that we've seen in the past couple months across most of the area. So with that, we'll go ahead and to the next slide, start looking ahead. And this is the 7-day quantitative precipitation forecast from the National Weather Service, which shows it doesn't show this, but we expect troughing and storminess across the Great Plains, and the storm track will kind of head up the Louisiana, Mississippi, and the Mississippi River Valley, where we can expect between 3 and 5 inches of rainfall in the next week or more. But as we proceed eastward into the ACF Basin, the forecast amounts are less, only between 1, 2, maybe 3 inches. But it does show a little good news for North Georgia, where they might get some welcome rainfall after the dryness they've experienced. On the next slide, we'll start taking a look a little further ahead and look at the Pacific Ocean. In the last couple months, we've experienced some stronger than normal trade winds across the Pacific Basin, which has kind of re-energized or strengthened the La Nina conditions that we've been dealing with on and off for the last 2 years. And looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies in the big map, we still see that well-defined cold tongue extending all along the equator and very cold waters off the coast of South America. So this indicates that La Nina conditions are likely to continue the next 1 to 3 months into the summer and even into the fall and hurricane season, which will be important, as we'll show in the next slide or two. And on the bottom, I show the Nino 3.4 index and a longer time series here going back to 1982 that clearly shows that we've had 2 years in a row of La Nina conditions. The sea surface temperature anomalies eased up a little bit last summer, but it doesn't appear they're going to do that this summer, and we're going to continue into a third year similar to 1999 through 2001. So we're not done with La Nina yet. As we go into the next slide, we'll see the official forecast. La Nina conditions are for very strong likelihood to continue into May, June, and July. But as we go through the summer and even into the winter months, we see that the chance of La Nina conditions continuing is up 50, 60% or so. So very strong likelihood that we'll see a third year of La Nina conditions. If you look at the little red bar graphs, that's the chance of El Nino developing. Very little to no chance of El Nino developing over the summer or into the fall. So looks like we're stuck with the colder than normal water temperatures in the Pacific and their implications. And over on the right is just the model forecast. They all heavily favor below normal sea surface temperatures in that region. Only a couple models go to warmer as we get into the fall. So the model consensus remains at La Nina levels throughout the fall and into the winter. So the main implications for that is on our hurricane season forecast. And here's an old graphic from a study done here at FSU several years ago, but it just looks at US hurricane landfalls, storms of hurricane strength or more between 1900 and 2009, and separates them into the 3 different categories of the Pacific Ocean: La Nina, El Nino in the red, and neutral in the green. And we did the analysis and plotted this as a probability of exceedance curve. And the way to read this is the likelihood of 1 or more hurricane landfalls is high in all 3 phases, between 70% and 90%. But as we go to the likelihood of 2 or more hurricane landfalls, we see a substantial difference. Only a 30% chance of 2 or more landfalls during El Nino phase, but a 65% chance of 2 or more landfalls during La Nina. So the chance of 2 or more hurricanes during La Nina conditions is over twice that of El Nino conditions. And as we go to 3 hurricanes or more making landfall, we see there's still nearly a 40% chance during the La Nina phase, but a very small chance during El Nino. So it really shows the impact of the phase of the Pacific Ocean on the Atlantic hurricane season. And with that in mind, we'll start taking a look at some of the official forecasts. Again, this is the first time in 7 years that it's not likely we're going to have a named storm in the month of May. But we are coming off 2 very active seasons, 2020 was the record setter with, I believe, 30 named storms. Last year was still much above normal with 21 named storms. What I don't have written here is the Gulf Coast has been a center of action where we had 6 landfalling storms of tropical storm strength or higher last year and 10 in 2020. So that trend may continue this year, and we have to watch very closely because it's the Gulf systems that would really impact our area and the ACF. Some of the other forecasts: Colorado State University forecast 19 named storms, 9 hurricanes, 4 of them becoming major hurricanes in strength, category 3 or above. The UK Met Office came out with their forecast last week with 18 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and again, 4 major hurricanes. And on the next slide, I believe we have the NOAA forecast that came out just this morning. They like to give a range in the number of storms, and they're forecasting between 14 and 21 named storms, 6 to 10 of those becoming hurricanes, and 3 to 6 major hurricanes. But also, if we look at the pie chart over on the left, we see there's a 65% chance of an above normal season, where only a 10% chance of a below normal season. So once again, similar to last year, this is a fairly strong forecast for an active season. So on the next slide, one more thing about hurricanes, you might have seen this in the news last week, is that the loop current is fairly prominent this year and extends well north into the Gulf of Mexico. While the loop current has really no impact on the number of storms or the seasonal forecast, if a hurricane was to track across it, it provides a real source of heat and energy for these storms to intensify, excuse me. And it's not just the sea surface temperatures, it's the waters of the loop current are very warm down deep. So the usual upwelling from a passing storm won't cut off its own energy supply nearly as easily when it's over this deep source of warm water like the loop current or some of the eddies. So some of the articles claim this was a very similar configuration to year 2005, where we had Hurricane Katrina devastate New Orleans. So with that, we'll switch gears and look at the 3-month or seasonal outlook of temperature and precipitation from the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center. And over on the left is the seasonal temperature outlook. No surprise, with recent trends over the last decade or more, most of the US is highly likely to have above normal temperatures this summer. Over on the right is the seasonal precipitation outlook for the next 3 months, where they actually indicate increased chances of above normal rainfall for the Florida Panhandle and for the ACF Basin and the tri-state area. So that's some good news as we get into the summer growing season. And on the next slide, with that in mind, this is the seasonal drought outlook, which again came out last week, and it shows the areas that are currently in moderate drought are forecast that drought removal is likely, given the forecast of enhanced precipitation and also the onset of the summer rainy season. All plays in the favor of drought removal is likely. So with that, we'll go ahead and summarize. Abnormally dry conditions and even moderate drought continue across South Georgia, parts of South Florida, and the coastal Carolinas. Short-term dryness is still a concern in the Lake Lanier and headwaters regions and also across South Georgia. We've had good to scattered coverage of 1 to 3 inches of rainfall over most of the area last week. And while 90-day deficits are unspectacular, it's the short-term dryness in between that's kind of been plaguing us. We have a favorable rainfall forecast for Alabama and even extending into North Georgia over the next 7 days. In the Pacific Ocean, La Nina has re-strengthened, and there's over a 50 to 60% chance it'll persist through the summer into the fall and winter for a third year in a row. The CPC seasonal forecast heavily favors above normal temperatures and to a lesser degree above normal rainfall. But drought improvement is likely in the areas currently affected.
All right, thank you for that update, David. And now I will fill in for Tom Littlepage with the state of Alabama input. We already saw David show us the drought monitor. Alabama's coverage of DO, or abnormally dry, has expanded to about 31%, up from about 4% last week, and the vast majority of that is concentrated in the northeast portion of the state. The Alabama Monitoring Impact Group met last month and released this Alabama drought declaration for regions 8 and 9, so our coastal counties and far southeastern Alabama, with a drought advisory. You can report impacts at the Alabama Office of Water Resources webpage, and that is www.water.alabama.gov. Our current status summed up: rainfall deficits and rising temps are increasing dryness around the state. I already mentioned the drought declaration from April 20th that had 2 advisory levels for 2 of the 9 regions of the state. There may be an expansion of those declaration areas that's anticipated as we head into the summer. However, there haven't been any water availability issues reported, and the Office of Water Resources continues to monitor those conditions. Now, that monitoring and impact group will meet directly after this webinar again at 1 p.m. Central. If you need that information, you can contact Tom Littlepage or myself if you'd like to attend that meeting. And now I'm going to turn it over to Paul Ankhorn for the stream flows and groundwater conditions. When you're ready, Paul.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So we'll start looking at the current stream flow conditions. So the map on the left is from our past webinar, which was April, and then the map on the right shows current conditions as of yesterday. So these are our long-term stations across the southeast, and then particularly in the ACF basin outlined. And you'll see pretty much a mixed bag ranging from normal conditions in the headwater and then moving down through the city. We're seeing some below normal and even much below normal. And middle of the basin is trending more towards the normal. And then you see the Flint River there is showing below normal and much below normal. Now, of course, these are real time. This was updated yesterday. So yesterday afternoon's rain has likely shifted these stations back towards the normal range. But again, that's just the fluctuations that we see during this type of, these summer months. So we'll move on to the next slide. And this is the below normal 7-day average. So again, back from March is the map on above at the top, and then you'll see some widespread ranking of much below normal in the lower map. So again, this is the 7-day average stream flow. So this is sort of a hydrologic drought indicator. So we're seeing some definite drying conditions through the southeast there, and then particularly in the ACF. That looks to me like the Acknowledgements Basin there is showing some moderate hydrologic drought. So again, this should all improve with the recent rainfall. All right, move on to the next slide. So here, again, this is pulled from the NIDIS drought portal dashboard. So these are 28-day average. So this is the daily average stream flow ranked against the historical daily mean for that time of day. So it's sort of a long-term trend for the last 4 weeks. So across much of the basin, it's either showing normal flow or below normal. Flint River's trending more towards the below normal than what we're seeing in the Chattahoochee. And headwaters flow into Lanier, we're seeing normal conditions there. So next slide, we'll just take a look at some of the data that you can access from the dashboard there. So by hovering over any of these long-term stations, you get the link that pops up there in blue. So go ahead and click that on the next slide. And that'll take you to the image on the left is showing the real-time stream flow, and it's set to 30 days. And then I've also toggled to last year's data, just for a point of reference. So you can see obviously the rise from yesterday's rainfall. But overall, it looks like compared to last year, we're flowing at about 75% of what we were seeing this time last year. So we're seeing some reduced flow for sure. And again, that's evident in the image on the right there. The graph on the right is showing the 28-day average, and that's the black line. You see a downward trend there. It's still ranking within normal, but it's a little steeper than what we would expect for this type or this time of year, which typically sees a downward reduction in flow as we move through the summer months. But as I pointed out, we're still ranking in normal, so that's good news for Lake Lanier inflows. The next slide, take a look. Now this is the Flint River near Griffin, and I mentioned there was some drying out or reduced flow in the Flint, and this is evident here. Again, looking at the instantaneous or the real-time flows, we're trending, about 20% less of last year. We have seen a rise of the past few days there. When you look at the 28-day average plot on the right, you see how that flow is just really fallen off. Back at the end of April, we were well above normal, and within 4 weeks, we have steepened that slope, and we've moved into the below normal conditions. So that's how quickly things can change. But then we would expect that to either uptick or at least level out based on yesterday's rain and hopefully the rain that we're about to see in the next 7 days. All right, next slide, please, Rachel. So we'll switch now to groundwater. So this is the groundwater network across the state of Georgia. These are real-time stations. So we've seen some, reductions in elevation for the well there. Up in the headwaters of the ACF, that green dot just above Helen there, that's Unicoi. So that's pretty much remained unchanged and ranked in normal elevation conditions. But then what we're seeing down in the south of the basin, wells are ranking in the below normal, so that's 10 to 24th percentile. So we typically look at the same 2 wells each month, and they're circled there. So the next slide, we'll take a look at Miller County. So graph on the left is the real-time data for the past 30 days. And then again, the statistical analysis of that data are plotted on the right. So you can see we've seen the level go down over the past 4 weeks, 8 weeks, I suppose, since our last webinar, but they are maintaining there in the normal conditions. So that's good news, at least for groundwater, for irrigation and so forth. So we'll look at the next, which will be Doherty County. So we typically see a little more fluctuation there. Both of these are upper Floridan aquifer. Right now, Doherty County, given that fluctuation, is still ranking in the 25th to 75th percentile, so normal conditions. All right, last slide. Just wrap up with a summary. So the real-time stream flows across the basin currently rank from much above normal to the below normal range. 7-day average stream flow indicates ACF basins currently rank between normal to areas of moderate hydrologic drought. The 28-day average stream flow for the Chattahoochee River currently ranked from normal to below normal. And then same 28-day average for the Flint River, ranking normal to below normal. And then real-time groundwater wells, the wells I just showed, currently rank both in the normal range. All right, Rachel, that concludes it. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Now I will turn it over to Cindy Donald with the reservoir conditions for the ACF.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, I'm going to. All right, so the first slide, you should, well, you don't have my slides. Sorry about that. And you guys aren't the only ones that didn't receive an email. I sent out another email, important email today that didn't make it to the intended recipient. So I apologize for that. So the first reservoir in the basin is Lake Lanier with Buford Dam, and the midnight pool was 1070.77, and we did record an inch of rain in the past 24 hours at the project. So that gave us a little bump in our inflows, which we're always thankful for. Over the next 4 to 5 weeks, we look for the reservoir elevation to remain steady, just under or right at 1071. And the next project in the system is West Point. The midnight pool elevation was 632.87. And while it is currently below guide curve, it is still in zone 1 and forecasted to rise a little over the next 4 to 5 weeks, and didn't get as much rain there as we did at Buford, but just a nice little bump that will keep us in zone 1. At Walter F. George, the midnight pool elevation was 188.55. It is also in zone 1 and forecasted to remain in zone 1 over the next 4 to 5 weeks. And they actually got a good bit of rain right above the reservoir, probably about 4 inches of rain localized in a small area, but hopefully that'll give us a good little increase in inflows so that we can continue to support the releases required at Woodruff. Lake Seminole and Jim Woodruff Dam, midnight elevation was 76.91, and we're forecasted to remain right at 76.5 for the reservoir over the next several weeks, and will continue to meet the release requirements below the dam. They do change on June 1st. The requirements change just a little bit and allow us to store a little bit more water at the upper projects. And the conservation storage, basin conservation storage is in zone 1 and is forecasted to remain in zone 1 over the next 4 to 5 weeks, and that allows us to fulfill all of our authorized purposes for our projects.
Okay, Cindy, thank you for that update. I am going to turn it over to Sam Lucas with Apalachicola Bay salinity information.
Thank you, Rachel, and hi, everyone. Today, we're going to be looking at the salinity levels of 3 of our water quality stations situated throughout the Apalachicola Bay system. One of our stations is located within the northern area of the system in East Bay. Then we have another south at Cat Point. This is located on a historic oyster bar. And then west of that, we have another located on a historic oyster bar called Dry Bar. All right, so first up, we're going to look at Cat Point's daily average salinity levels. These percentile ranges were created from daily average salinity data from 1992 to 2022 for cap point. So overall for this year so far, the majority of the salinity data is falling within that 25th to 75th percentile range. There's been some moments where it's crossed into the upper and into the lower percentile ranges, but overall it's been in that mid-range. We haven't had a ton of rain here recently or any large storm events, so this is looking rather normal for this time of year. We'll be interested to see how this progresses throughout the summer, but we can go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. All right, now our dry bar data does not go quite as far as our cap point and our East Bay data does for today. Cap point went until May 19th. This stopped at the end of April. We had an equipment malfunction with our most recent deployment, so I apologize for that. But you can still see the trend from January through the end of April for the year. And this is looking a little bit similar to cap point, you know, a lot of mid-range in the 25th to 75th percentile range. But we do have quite more dips into the upper and the lowers. This station, since it's situated at the western portion of the bay, does get influxes from the river as well as from the pass that it's near. All right, next slide, please. All right, and for our last station, this is East Bay Bottom, positioned in the northernmost section of the bay. We have just a blip of data that's missing, but overall you can see the trend so far. We are seeing higher salinity levels right now at East Bay Bottom. Again, we haven't got a lot of rain, and river discharge has been decreasing since about the middle of April through May. I was checking out the Sumatra River gauge, and it has been steadily decreasing. So this station, since it's so close to the rivers, is rather affected by discharge. Okay, next slide. All right, and then I wanted to go ahead and give one last shout out since we are transitioning to the drought dashboard. If you're interested in looking at salinity levels, and it looks like my most recent picture did not make it on there, but that is totally okay. But if you're interested in looking at salinity levels throughout different coastal areas, you can check out the Coastal Salinity Index within the drought dashboard. This was developed by USGS. And not only can you see coastal salinity, you also can look at the Drought Monitor as well for those areas. So they'll be in different colors depending on the status. Next slide, please. All right, so just to recap again, cap point salinity values have been largely within the 25th to 75th percentile range and continue to be as of May 19th. Unfortunately, we don't have current dry bar data due to an equipment malfunction. But on April 27th, values fell within the 25th to 75th percentile range. And then last but not least, East Bay Bottom salinity values were within the lower percentile ranges mid-March to the beginning of April. And values have increased and are within the 25th to 75th percentile range as of May 19th. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Sam. And now I'm going to turn it over to Todd Hamill, sorry about that typo there, with our Streamflow forecast to wrap us up.
You're just fine. I think that was my typo when I sent it to you. So I'm going to go through a little bit of our MMEFS, our meteorological model ensemble forecasts for a lot of the basin. This is starting at the top of the basin, just below Lake Lanier. And what you can see, and you'll see this through all of each of the different graphics we're going to look at over the next 5 or so, is that due to the recent dry weather, topped with our evapotranspiration rates, our competition for that water is increasing that time because we're greening out. It takes a lot more rainfall to produce rises in these rivers. And so even though we've seen recent heavier rainfalls, we're not seeing that even with the forecasted rainfalls in the northern part of Georgia, as David showed just a little while ago. So this is looking out 10 days, and here's the Chattahoochee River near findings, and we do see a little bump over the next few days based on recent rainfall, and even next week into the early part of June we have a little bit. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, which will move a little bit further downstream and a little bit further away from the reservoir. And you can see a little bit higher rise up from there, but not much more of a rise. We just have a lot more local flow and less impact from the reservoirs and reservoir releases as we get further downstream into the basin. But we do see a little bit of a rise, but again, things stay below flood stage, but this is kind of what we expect this year. So let's go ahead and go on to the next one, and we will move over to the Flint River at the top of the Flint, just south of Atlanta, at the Flint River near Lovejoy. And again, this is uncontrolled in some of those areas, and we've had a little bit of recent rainfall, but in the rainfall that we're expecting in the coming 5 days or so, we should see some rises again on that river. And again, this is uncontrolled flow, so we don't have any impact from the reservoirs or any impact from the core dams. So we do see a little bit more of a rise in there, but again, not very much. So we'll go ahead and move on a little bit further downstream in South Georgia and the Flint River near Albany. And it does take a little bit more for that to get up, just because we do see the timing issues. We don't have as much rainfall forecast for the south part of Georgia as we do for the north part of Georgia. So it does look like we will get some rain this week, and it will move downstream into the Albany area. And we could see, again, some rises, but again, all below action stage, and still staying at pretty low levels. So let's go on below the dam at Lake Woodruff, which is our next one. And what you see is continuing falling. We do have normal, it looks like, as Cindy mentioned, we're in that zone 1, so they're able to make fairly normal releases from their reservoirs right now. And so we're starting to see, this is the time of year when we would see those flows start to drop and them not having as much water in the river. And that's what we're showing here, is we don't have as much water moving through the system, and unless we get some heavy rainfall. And oftentimes when we get to this part of the year, it often has to do with tropical weather. And this most recent system was kind of tropical, as David mentioned before. It was, it could have been, and it had that swirling as it moved through Georgia and up into South Carolina, and we did get some good rains from it, but really we're not seeing that many rises. So let's go ahead and look at our climatology for this time of year. Again, as what I mentioned, is that this is kind of what we would expect for this time of year. We're coming out of our peak flood season, which is also known as the recharge season, and as the plants green up, and it just takes a lot more rainfall to be able to produce flooding across the southeast, and over Georgia. And so you see that we come down and we really start to quiet down. We're in week 21, and we really start to back out of that until we get to week 25 or 26, which gets us to the end of June. And then you see things start to perk up through the rest of the season as you start to include a lot of tropical weather, because that's when we start to get enough rainfall from those tropical systems that we start to see flooding again. And you start to get not just minor floods, but some moderate and major floods in the southeast. And so this is not the time of year we would typically expect that. Again, it can happen at any time of year, as you can see from the graph. But climatologically, we are quieting down a little bit, and we're following that pattern this year. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And this is forecast for Georgia. We don't show the low ones, but one thing interesting you can see in here, nothing is in flood. I think it's probably been 2, 3, maybe 4 years, or action stage. It's probably been 4 years since we've had one of these where no point was in flood. It has been a very active few years. And so for us to start talking about this and really talking about how little rain we've had, it's been a rarity. And so we do not have anything in flood at this time. And it looks like that's probably going to stay the same as we get into early June, at least from the current forecast. So let's go ahead and move forward. So our June forecast shows we're near normal. Because we have lower stream flows, but we've had recent rainfall, our chances, we could be above normal, but we could still fall below normal. It wouldn't take it would take a tropical system or some heavy rainfall from frontal systems moving through to give us a chance for some heavy rainfall. And we're looking to see at least some of that over the next week or so as we get rainfall above the Lake Lanier Basin and at the top, both at the top of the Flint River and over near Whitesburg. So we do have a chance for near normal. So let's go and look at the seasonal forecast, which goes June through August. And we really, for the most part, have equal chances for above normal, near normal, and below normal. And part of that comes from we're starting out a little bit dry, but the forecast is showing. But the forecast is showing a little bit above normal conditions from the Climate Prediction Center. We're showing above normal over parts of this area. So we have to at least factor that into the potential over the next 3 months. And while it takes a little bit more rain to do that, it does look like there is at least that possibility and that chance. So let's go ahead and move to our last slide. And so as very simply, our 1 month stream flow shows near normal, our 3 months shows near normal. And just a thanks from both Jeff and I for the past, as we talked about, I think it's been about 11 years we've been doing this, and we appreciate everybody joining us. So we'll look forward to more time with you all as we do our Southeast one coming up in next month.
Thank you, Todd. And yes, I cannot believe you and Jeff have been involved with this since the beginning for 11 years. That's really cool. I don't know of many webinar series, maybe any webinar series, actually, now I'm saying this, that's been running quite that long consistently. It's pretty neat. So Meredith Muth of NIDIS had a couple things that she wanted to bring to everyone's attention. I'll turn it over to Meredith now.
Great, thank you, Rachel. Yes, so this is our final regular monthly webinar series for the ACF River Basin. It's been going on for 11 years. I need to take a moment and just express tremendous thanks to the information providers and your dedication and your consistency for showing up month after month, wanting to improve early warning throughout the river basin. And so in particular, of course, Jeff and Todd from the River Forecast Center that have been doing this since the beginning. David Zierden, I think you've been involved since when the Southeast Climate Consortium existed. And then, of course, we've had USGS, Army Corps. We've had all of these incredible partners since the beginning. And so thank you. But just a quick reminder that this is not necessarily the end of bringing together these partners to disseminate timely information. If drought intensifies in the ACF River Basin, this entire group of presenters and partners have already agreed that we will step up and we will begin to either restart these webinars as needed or look for other ways to have dialogues and help support the community with drought and water information. In addition, on a regular basis, hopefully everybody on this call right now has bookmarked somewhere the ACF River Basin Drought and Water Dashboard. Maybe you can put that link, Rachel, one more time in the chat. Certainly we won't have all the incredible storytelling that we've had here, but you can definitely find timely information on current and future conditions, as well as some historical data. And we have the drought story map. So please make sure you check that regularly. It's a great way to also capture information, integrate it into briefings, reports, social media, communications that you're doing with your partners, your stakeholders, your organizations. So next. And one last thing is that the drought early warning system for the broader Southeast region, just a reminder that we are having a drought meeting where we're bringing together drought experts across the region, about 6 or 7 states. And you can, if you could also, I'll put that link into the chat in just a moment. Feel free to check out and register if you think that you would be interested in joining. You can look at the agenda. So next, Rachel. I think that's it, but of course, one big applause for Rachel McGuire, and before that, other partners at Auburn who have been kind of steering the ship for the last many years. We're really grateful for all you've done, and in disseminating, of course, the monthly recap emails are incredibly useful. We've heard from people that they're useful, so thank you, Rachel, and I will turn it back to you.
Thanks, Meredith. And I'll just say before I was hosting these, I started about 4 years ago. This has been the main source of information about climatology and drought related impacts for me. This certainly was not my background at all, and I've really enjoyed learning from all of our presenters. So it's been a great experience. And like Meredith said, we'll come back together when there is the need, when drought intensifies in the region. So it's not goodbye forever, just a small goodbye. And then we hope that you'll transition over to the Southeast monthly webinars if you're not already joining those. And of course, that dashboard has all the information, just minus the fun storytelling that you get in these webinars monthly. All right, well, thank you to everyone. We're gonna have a little bit of time for questions. If there are any, you can raise your hand or you can use the question box, whichever you prefer, and I'll pause for a moment.
Yeah, hi, Rachel. This is David Zierden again. There's just one thing I would like to leave the group with is that we have been through 2 years of the La Nina phase and fortunately remained mostly drought free, especially when we're talking about D2 through D4, the higher levels of drought over a large area or extended time period. We've avoided that over the last 2 years, which is very unusual. So we've got a third year coming up, it seems might be possible. So we still have to keep our eyes out and really monitor the situation and start being prepared for drier conditions come late summer and fall if the Pacific Ocean continues like it is.
In other words, we may be seeing you sooner rather than later.
That's my plan.
All right, well, thanks, David. And I don't have any questions that are showing up, so I'll let everybody go. And thank you for being here. Have a great day.